Now, I've talked about the dehumanization process, and believe me, it's gone as far worse than I, because all the time you get information coming in. And then there's the government of Norway, I think it was, who actually pay couples, pornographers actually, to have sex in the streets to save the rainforest and stuff like that. They give them grants, this non-governmental organization. Grants for that. No kidding. You see, countries like that have gone. They're finished. That's the history. That's why they bring the historians in to the big think tanks and to the State Department and to the United Nations and advisors to Obama. How did previous cultures go down the tubes? So if you want to go down the tubes, and that is the intention, remember, destruction of nationalism across the world. That's why they formed the Macy Group, and the president gave them the right to change forever American culture, because they thought it was too fascist. It might go the way that Hitler went after World War II. And they've been at it ever since, and for interdependence, etc. And so they literally have changed the whole world, way of thinking, way of being, and that's why they funded all these crazy groups to make sure that you literally will have nothing of the past to hold on to. And they just bypass the present generation and go for the young every time. Lenin said that was a strategy. And again, too, once a nation is coming to an end or an empire comes to an end, you have debauchery everywhere. It was called debauchery. You have complete devaluation of human life, massive sexual promiscuity of all the most bizarre types. It keeps getting more bizarre all the time. And then the elite themselves, or the managerial class, and previous, like Greece and Rome, didn't have children, so there's nobody left to take over of the managerial class, you see. This time they actually pay the managerial class to have children. Doesn't matter if they're married or not, just have a child, and they get trained in special schools, like the United Nations. The ones in the United Nations have their own schools for UN children that are the offspring of people at the United Nations. That they actually breed them there. No kidding. And they have another one for the ones running the European Union, for all the bureaucrats. It's just astonishing. You see, all democracy in your government is just, as I say, all it is now is the rubber stamp from all the big think tanks and foundations that run the world. That's really what it is. And as it dehumanized society in all kinds and ways until it cannot stand, because that's when you destroy nationalism and then you're international. I've already talked about how they hang people on, well, actually were people who are dead now, hang them on wires, plasticize them, and hang them on display and pretend it's art, So the artsy-fartsy liberal types can go and say, yes, it's terribly interesting. There's this corpses dangling away there. That kind of nonsense. But now they're going after the organ harvesting even more than it has before. I'll touch on this when I come back from this break. Hi folks, I'm back cutting through the matrix, and it's true enough, if you want to understand the formula of how to build up a nation or take it down, you just study the past. And that's why, as I say, they keep bringing historians and philosophers in to advise presidents. Carroll Quigley himself did that in a big time for the State Department and even for the Pentagon. So they understand the warfare they wage on others, and now they're waging the war on themselves, because the US must sink into the system that it's funded and created. It's just finishing off the last few countries as they go down the tubes. I've always said that they'd pull the rug from under Americans at home to fit into the very system which they helped create. But anyway, dehumanization is a big part of it, of course, if you want to end the old system. And we see the same things, as I say, with dead corpses or corpses hanging on wires, plasticized, and even ones with fetuses or babies in them. They have them ripped off, let you see, and you can ponder and go, ooh. And they even hire them out for movies. They've been in movies, some of these things, sitting around bars, and for the avant-garde who don't get put off by anything. They're so liberal, nothing upsets them, except maybe, another side of things. But anyway, here's an article here about the organ donations. I've mentioned this is a big racket across the world. That is part of the dehumanization process. And it's also to get you used to the fact that you're nothing. The whole idea of, there's so many folk on the planet, you're just another animal, yada, yada, yada. That was one of another tenet set out by Julian Huxley at United Nations, UNESCO. a long time ago. He says we must kick man off his pedestal and bring him down to the level of the animals. And then, of course, in the Earth Summit with Maurice Strong, written up, of course, by the Rockefeller family, private organization, again, the Earth Summit that we've all signed on to and we're following like it's the law, then you'll find that the animals have more rights than we do now. And now they dehumanize us until we accept we're dehumanized. We will behave like animals. And that's how we're treated by the cops. And that's how the cops are told to look upon us, actually, in this present system. Anyway, in some countries, in retrieving organs, you can actually put in a bid before you kill them. Of course, like China, if the DNA match-up's pretty good, they'll actually take the guy out and show him for you from a prison. And in other countries, they're catching up. They were a bit behind in the West. They were, old-fashioned and stuff. Anyway, surgeons retrieving organs to be transplanted just after a patient's heart has stopped beating will no longer have to wait to make sure it doesn't start up again if new proposals are adopted. I think in the US, it's actually brain death, and then they can go in when the heart is beating. They prefer that, actually. And in other countries, it has to be the hearts that have stopped beating before they can go in, and they call it harvesting. And harvesting is an interesting term because it's a farming term, isn't it? You harvest the wheat and the grain. And again, it's all perception management. Well, they're just harvesting, organs, Organs. And you are a business now. We're all a business, right down to when you're after your autopsies. I mean, that bill from the autopsy or the guy who does a post-mortem, that goes to the government, local government, and gets paid for that. Doesn't matter what you died of, or even if they know what you were died of after all the tests. They've got to do that. It's all procedure, and he gets his cut as well. And then they train us through all the movies and police movies that this is normal. That should be called desecration of the body, when they chop out the brain and drop your liver into a weighing machine and, how interesting, it weighs so-and-so, and back in again, then they stitch you up. It's desecration. You understand, we're all trained through fiction until services become authorities. Anyway, the critics now fear seriously ill patients could be viewed more like tissue banks than sick people if the plans to change rules about organ donation go ahead. There's currently a ban on considering anyone to be a potential donor before doctors and family members have independently decided to stop trying to save them. That's poised to be eliminated if the plans by the group that coordinates organ allocation in the United States are adopted. So, see, they're amalgamating all these non-profit organizations that rake in billions of dollars every year, like the Richmond non-profit organization. That's who handles the organs themselves, make a lot of cash out of it. So under non-profit, you can give your CEO $2 million a year if you want to as a paycheck. And they call themselves a charity. That's a racket of NGOs. The proposed changes by the United Network for Organ Sharing, the Richmond non-profit organization that coordinates organ donation under a contract with the federal government, are part of the first major overhaul of the 2007 guidelines governing donation after cardiac death, or DCD, which accounted for 6% of the 28,000 organs transplanted in 2010. Champions of the proposals claim the changes strengthen the transplant system because they align the rules with other regulatory bodies and better ensure that the wishes of donors and their loved ones are honoured without sacrificing necessary protections. It means it's easier to get the organs for those big guys with the cash who deal in organs, plus the big surgeons who make the incredible money off transplantation as well. That's really what it's about. Everything's law speak, isn't it? Legal speak and chronology. Isn't it? That's what it's all about. It's always about cash. And people who want to get more cash. And it's a great system because they get it all for nothing. I mean, you being a sustainable or a renewable resource, you see, that's what we're classified now under the United Nations. You're all renewable resources, humans. We give ourselves voluntarily for free. And these guys make their living off what's left of you. It's just astonishing, really. So that some fat multi-billionaire can live another 2 or 3 years, generally. That's generally what it is. Because I know some transplant surgeons. I get all the inside stuff. Yeah.